Hello everyone and welcome to a very special Halloween themed video where I will be talking about my top 5 favourite horror movies that I have ever seen. Now before I get into the list I do want to make a couple of things very clear. First of all, like I've stated in the past, I'm not a huge fan of the horror genre. The only horror movies that I watch are either ones that have been personally recommended to me or horror films that I've heard are genuinely good from just like a general background. Apart from that, I don't really watch that many horror movies. I don't go out of my way to watch every horror movie that gets released. I just watch ones that I personally want to watch. And that leads on to my second thing, which is this list is my own personal opinion. So if your favourite horror movie isn't on the list, or if there's a classic that you should think should be on the list but isn't, then there's a very good chance that I probably have either not seen it or I just didn't like it. And it's all a matter of personal opinion. Some of the movies I've chosen may not be considered as masterpieces or filmmaking perfection, but these are the horror movies that I enjoy the most. And finally, number 3, there are a couple of horror movies that I have seen that I do like quite a lot, but I don't think are worthy enough of being some of my favourites. So I'm going to quickly run through some of my honourable mentions. These are movies that I really like, but unfortunately don't love enough to put them on the list. So my honourable mentions are The Exorcist, a very scary horror movie that unfortunately hasn't aged that well in terms of effects and the way it's filmed. The Shining, a very good psychological horror movie that I liked the first time I saw it, but unfortunately I didn't like as nearly as much as everyone else does. I do need to watch it again at some point though, because there were a few things that kind of puzzled me when I first saw it, and I really do need to rewatch it again because I haven't seen it in some time. My next honourable mention is The Babadook, a very good psychological horror movie from Australia. A really good sense of tension and a really good disturbing atmosphere. And it's basically a really good movie that really unsettles you. It doesn't scare you straight away with a shit ton of jump scares. It takes its time to build suspense and just build a creepy tone and atmosphere that really does unsettle you even a couple of hours after you've seen the movie. And my final honourable mention is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, an absolute classic that still holds up pretty well today. I really liked the way the plot just unravelled itself as you watch the movie. I thought the performances were pretty good and it still holds up pretty well. Okay, so now that the preamble is out the way, let's finally get into the list. And at number 5 is a movie that came out last year and I don't think enough people saw, and it's called Train to Busan. It's a zombie movie from South Korea that takes place entirely on a high-speed bullet train. Now, I don't watch that many subtitled movies. Probably The Raid is as best as I can do. But I decided to check out Train to Busan because I'd heard some really good things about it. And I'm really glad I did, because it's easily one of the most entertaining and easily one of the most intense horror movies that I've seen. There are so many things to love about this movie, but the main thing that drives this movie forward is its characters. You've got the main character and his daughter. I thought they were really well realised, and by the time the end of the movie came along, I actually found myself crying. And I honestly did not expect to cry, especially at a South Korean zombie movie. So the fact that it had that emotional punch at the end really did surprise me in the best possible way. There are also other memorable characters, like there's this one guy and his wife who is pregnant. I thought they were really good characters, and the banter he had with the father, the main character of the movie, I thought was really nice to see. You also have these two college students. They were really, I thought, interesting characters as well. And there's this one guy who I can basically describe as one of the biggest arseholes I've ever seen in a movie. Honestly, if I was on this train with these people, I would grab this guy by the collar and throw him off the train. He is so annoying, but in a really good way. And the fact that you have this one character to hate to the core I think is really well done, especially in the writing department and the way that character is acted. It can be a little bit over the top at times, but that being said, I still think he is a very good character, especially seeing how much I hated him by the time the movie was over. Also, the zombie action scenes in the movie are really, really well handled. And I think there is a very nice variety of stuff they do in terms of how the humans get past the zombies. For example, there's one part of the movie where some of the survivors are stuck on a carriage about this far down the train, and the rest of the survivors are in a few carriages further down. Unfortunately, there is a crap ton of zombies in between them, and I thought the way they went about getting from A to B was really interesting, because you could have it as one long action scene where these people just fight their way through the zombies and just have it as that. But they don't do that. Instead, they inject some personal some character moments. They inject some actually properly suspenseful, intense moments as well. And they use a really good way of using these zombies' weaknesses to the human's advantage, and that leads for some incredibly suspenseful moments when the train passes through tunnels. Now, a lot of the movies on this list aren't just my favourite horror movies, but they're actually just some of my favourite movies in general. And probably the best example of this is my choice for number 4, which is Cloverfield. I have loved this movie ever since I first saw it, and I've rewatched it multiple times since, and I notice something new every single time. And it's one of those things where every time you notice something new, it does add to the overall experience in terms of the characters and the story of the movie. And that's one thing I absolutely love about Cloverfield. If you are put off by the fact that it's found footage, please don't let that put you off of watching it, because unlike most found footage movies, it actually uses the found footage aspects to its advantage and actually plays with it a little, kind of leading to some somewhat unconventional ways of telling the story. But that being said, the unconventional techniques they use are just one of many things that I love about this movie. I love the monster design. There are some genuine, what the fuck moments that happen in the movie. The characters are pretty good, especially for a movie like this, because there are other found footage movies where the main characters can actually be kind of annoying, but here they feel like real people, and that's kind of what makes you want them to survive. Also, interesting little fact that some of you may or may not know, movie composer Michael Giacchino actually did record and write some pieces for Cloverfield, but unfortunately, because they went with a found footage aspect, none of them could be used. They managed to fit one song at the end credits, which is called Raw, and it is a really, really good piece of music, which I'll leave a link to in the description. It sounds very Godzilla-esque. But that being said, now that I know he recorded some music, I kind of wish they'd gone in a different direction now, and I would have been really interested to see where they could have gone with that and what the music would have sounded like. At number 3 is John Carpenter's The Thing. I mean, what do I say about this movie that hasn't already been said? The practical effects are amazing, but also gross at the same time. They still hold up incredibly well today. It's directed incredibly well, and there is a lot of suspense and tension in the movie that does add to the overall atmosphere. Ennio Morricone's score is iconic and perfectly fits the storytelling techniques and the atmosphere of the movie yet again, and the acting is really good from everyone, Keith David and Kurt Russell being some of my favourites in the movie. One thing that I absolutely love about this movie is the fact that as you're watching it, you're just as clueless as the main characters as to who the thing actually is. And that's mostly down to a thing that John Carpenter did on set, whereby whenever they were going to film a conversation scene between the main characters, he never told any of them who the thing was. It was only during scenes where the thing actually reveals itself is when John Carpenter said, okay, you're the thing. Okay, in this scene, you're the thing. But for conversational scenes, he never told anyone who the thing was. And it just makes it that bit more realistic and tense because they don't know who it is and neither do we. If you're not a big fan of gore in horror movies, then I would highly recommend you stay away from The Thing, because even though the really action-oriented and gory scenes are only scattered here there throughout the movie, they are bloody intense in terms of the stuff they do. For example, like I said, the practical effects are still pretty damn impressive today. And they lead to some of the best scenes in the movie. For example, the iconic defibrillator scene is an amazing piece of film making right there. And also the blood test scene, which is probably one of my favourites in the movie. It just adds to the overall, tone of the movie. I didn't know who was going to be it next. And it just keeps you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. And honestly, the best kinds of horror movie should really do that. Put you in the moment and make you want to root for the main characters. And keep you on the edge of your seat for as long as possible. At number 2 is easily the most entertaining movie on this list. And that is The Cabin in the Woods. Now, I'm going to start off by saying probably one of the only gripes I have with this movie. It could have been a lot scarier. Apart from that, this movie is an utter blast. What this movie does best is kind of dissect the horror genre as a whole to the bone. And even if you're a fan of horror movies or not, but you just love movies in general, you can still find a lot to appreciate about The Cabin in the Woods. And one thing I love about this movie is the fact that it starts off very cliched, as if you're going to see a pretty normal horror movie. Some teens go to stay in a cabin in the woods and they're obviously going to die. But then there are subtle hints throughout the start of the movie that kind of make you go, okay, where's this coming into it? This is going to lead to something, right? And that's mostly the first act. In the middle act, that's mostly setting up the premise, the other aspect that was hinted at the start, and also setting up the start of the scaring part. But it's the third act that is easily my favourite part of the movie. When a certain thing happens, and if you've seen the movie you'll know exactly what I'm on about, what I can only best describe it as shit hits the fan. And it's one of the most satisfying moments that I've ever seen in any movie ever. And I never thought I'd say this about a horror movie, but as this stuff was happening, I just had a huge smile on my face because it wasn't necessarily scary, it was just pretty damn cool seeing all of these things happening at once. That's not to distract from the other stuff though. I think Drew Goddard did a very good job directing the movie. I think the script is on point, the best way I can say it. There are some moments that are absolutely hilarious. There's not that many funny moments in the movie to class it as a horror comedy, but it has just the right amount of comedy moments. And obviously seeing that it's written by Joss Whedon, it's just that right kind of humour that doesn't detract from the overall story, but is just a nice added bonus. Yeah, there's not really much else I can say about The Cabin in the Woods. I have a ton of fun with it every time I see it, and whenever Halloween comes around, this is easily the first film I always go to. And finally, my number 1 favourite horror movie that I've ever seen is Alien. Now, everything I have to say about this movie can be found in the review I did for this movie back a few months ago in preparation for Alien Covenant. So what I'm about to say is basically a shortened version of the stuff I said in that review. But yeah, Alien has everything I would want from a horror movie. It's genuinely scary, it's incredibly suspenseful, the characters feel like real people because they are written like real people, and the creature design is absolutely fantastic. The Xenomorph is probably one of my favourite, actually scrap that, it is my favourite creature that I've ever seen in a movie. There are times where I watch Alien and it utterly does creep me out, but there are other times where I watch it and I'm just utterly fascinated by the stuff that's happening. Because as the movie progresses and you start to see more and more of the Xenomorph, you want to honestly know more about how it works and just, you know, the way it does things. For example, the whole process of the face hugger, then the face hugger comes off and then it lays an egg in the chest and all that, I just find genuinely fascinating. Also, the reason why I probably prefer Alien to any of the other Alien movies that have come after it is just because it's simple, it's a straightforward, suspenseful horror movie, and it knows it's a suspenseful, straightforward, claustrophobic horror movie. Whereas the others take that element and just kind of add to it. For example, Aliens, even though that is still a great movie, takes the suspenseful horror aspect but shoves action in there. And then Alien 3 does another, adds another thing. Alien Resurrection adds another thing. Alien Covenant adds a lot more things. And the reason why I love Alien so much is just because it's simple but incredibly effective. So guys, those were my 5 favourite horror movies that I have ever seen. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think, so post down in the comments below what some of your favourite horror movies are and I'll be sure to check them out. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye!